Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Welcome to Promo's Big Rebound and the Industry Outlook for 2022. In this webinar, we'll be drilling down into the numbers and narratives that tell the tale of the promotional products industry's remarkable return to growth in 2021. We'll also be delving into what lies ahead for the rest of 2022, both opportunities and challenges. My name is Chris Ruvo. I'm Digital News Director with ASI Media. I'll be hosting and chiming in. The real expert, though, today on these matters is our featured guest and my colleague, Nate Kucsma. Nate is ASI's Senior Executive Director of Research and Corporate Marketing. He spearheads our ASI Distributor Quarterly Sales Survey, from which we establish important benchmarks like total industry revenue and distributor financial confidence. Nate's the man behind the important numbers, so to speak. Nate, thanks for being with me today.
Chris, always a pleasure.
All right, so I'll just remind everybody before we jump into these questions that if you have questions or comments and you want to chime in, please do so, and we'll follow along and we'll try to get to everything. So Nate, let's start with the good news, the top line good news. What were Promo Distributors' total sales in 2021, and can you put into context how much they increased?
Yeah, easily. So Promo sales were up 12% from 20 to 21. That was after being down 19.8%, I believe was the exact number in 2020. And I mean, obviously 2021 was very different than 2020 in mostly positive ways.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that mean? So that means that overall sales were increased over to $23.2 billion in 21. That was well up. That was up several $billion over 2020 numbers, which I'm looking at my notes, it was 20.7. In 2019, just for reference, it was 25.8 billion. So they're still down from where they were back pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. But it was definitely a very nice pickup in 21, especially considering that there were still a lot of headwinds in 21 that the industry, and let's be honest, the entire economy,
exactly. Was facing. Yeah, and I want to point out that you mentioned the 2019 number. I think it was 25.2 billion or thereabouts for the industry. That was an all-time record.
It was.
So that was always going to be a tough one to get back to. But the fact that distributor sales were back up over 23 billion, which is still among the highest revenue tallies our industry has ever had, and the fact that it happened amid, as you say, ongoing challenges from the pandemic, really the industry can collectively feel good about that and feel that we've moved in the right direction. Is that a fair characterization?
You can, and it's also something that you don't want to undersell like how much actually changed, right? Because in 2020, yeah, sales were down 20%, right? But 20 some percent of those sales in 2020 were PPE products.
Right.
That really, if it wasn't for those, the industry would have been down 35-40% in 2020. So you have to strip out most of those PPE products from the overall industry sales in 21. So yeah, sales increased by 12%, but sales of promo products and promo apparel actually increased significantly more than 12% because they had to make up for all of the PPE sales that were around in 20 that were not around for the most part, right, in 21. There were still some PPE sales, and we're still figuring out that exact categories right now for the SOI, the State of the Industry, that we conduct, but they were nowhere near the 25% that they were in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I could think of it. I won't name it to be unfair, but there's a certain company I think did close to 50 million in our industry in PPE in 2020, and that number came down to around like 1 million the following year. So it shows the kind of dramatic drop off that happened. And as you say, our gain as an industry in 2021 was really fueled by core business. It was fueled by so that's really good. So let's actually talk a little bit more. Sometimes people ask, how do you arrive at that number, that 23.2 billion or that 12% increase? Can you give us some of the calculus behind it? Just what goes into tabulating it?
There ain't no calculus behind it. I'm just going to throw that out there right now.
Okay.
That is. I do statistics, not calculus. Thank God for small miracles on that one. Yeah, a lot of it's done. It's sort of like a multifaceted approach, right? So what we do is we actually look at how the industry is trending throughout the entire year. Okay, so like we do quarterly surveys throughout the year, starting with Q1, and actually the survey is going out for Q1 2022 tomorrow. On what do you call it? No fooling, right? So it's going out on April 1st for Q1 22. But we do surveys throughout the course of the year to sort of see where things are trending and what is the industry overall saying. And then we also conduct ancillary research in between those surveys as part of other research that we do. And then honestly, we talk to people. We make sure we hear what they're saying. We hear what the trends are. And then we incorporate this quantitative research. And over the course of the year, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of surveys that play into this research and I mean all different types of sizes of distributors. We're talking anywhere from top 40 down to your local, sole proprietorships. And then we, in talking with our, ASI media editorial team, we take what I'm finding, we kind of discuss it amongst ourselves. And then we finally say, this is actually where it is. This is what we're seeing. This is what the numbers are saying. This is what the membership and this is what the industry is saying. And then we go forward with that. It's a year-long effort to come up to this number.
And good. And I think it's important to explain that because you wouldn't want the misperception out there that, hey, we talked to a few of the largest companies in the industry, kind of aggregate what their various increases are, and then we come up with a number. This really is representative of, as you say, from the mom and pop up to some, the halos of the world, the largest companies in our industry. So it is a collective number that's formulated over the course of the year. So that's with a ton of data points. Okay. So we mentioned you had kind of started to get into it. Obviously the 2021 performance was good. What really drove that performance? We talked about core promo kind of returning. Can you jump into that a little bit? What did that look like?
Yeah, so it was a couple of things. Right? Obviously, core promo is, sort of returning was definitely was the biggest driver, right? But what exactly does that mean and why did that happen? But it was the return of live events, right? Not only trade shows, but it was the return of sporting events. It was the return of concerts. It was the return of large charity, drives. It was charity walks. It was the return of life getting more back to normal than it had been for the vast majority of 2020, especially when you look at Q2 and Q3 when kind of everything shut down. So it was that. It was also corporate giving, corporate gifting, I guess you could say, to employees over the course of the year. That was something that came about and really got a huge boost in 20 when everybody started to work from home, and that continued on into 21. There were also industries, right? There were certainly some strong industries. The number one industry for promo I think for as long as I've been at ASI, and I joined ASI back in 2014, had been education, right? Education, both from like a sporting event perspective, from a fundraising perspective, to a student engagement and potential student engagement. It's kind of countless, right? How much promo is used in education, just the number of ways. Well, education was down last year for the first time, and actually healthcare rose to the forefront in terms of overall industry sales. So I think it was the rebounding of education. It wasn't that all of a sudden other places dropped down, although healthcare, might have taken a little bit of hit from the PPE because that was really flooded with it early on. But it was really the rise of certain industries. It was the resurgence of the hospitality industry, which got crushed in 20 and is still recovering to this day. Manufacturing, construction, those all of a sudden kicked into high gear again. So it was different industries that we saw that had been a little bit depressed in 20 coming back and sort of gaining back the footprint that they had lost.
Great overview, and I think I really just want to seize on the corporate gifting aspect of it because we use that word pivot, right, in 2020 over and over and over again. But you could really say there was another huge pivot, right, in 2021. It did begin in 2020, but I think it really even accelerated in 2021, which was with everybody working from home, or seemingly everybody working from home. And then as time went on, there was a real clamor to try to get quality workers, and it was the competition for quality workers intensified as the economy heated up. Companies across industries were, especially keen to show that they appreciated their workers, as part of attracting workers, they were using merchandise to do that. So part of all those worker appreciation and attraction and retention efforts, promo products distributors stepped up, and of course with supplier partners too, and started doing all these drop shipping programs, right? Instead of I sell you 2,000 T-shirts for your event. It's I'm going to create you a box with a tumbler and a T-shirt and a journal and something else, and I'm going to have that shipped out to 2,000 different locations where your employees are working remotely. So while our industry had, of course, done that before, I don't think it had done it on the mass scale that it did in 2021. And I think that was so pivotal to driving up that sales number for you.
Oh my God! I mean, kidding, right? That was a word that I don't know that we had used much before March 15th
Yeah.
of 2020, right? And all of a sudden, kidding became something that we were actually asking people about and learning about. And there was writing about a ton of it. So yeah, there was definitely a movement of that, and it moved pretty quickly. And I'm not using the P word, Chris. I'm not using it. I'm just saying we moved in that direction.
It was a great move in a different direction. Perfect. You anticipated my next question, Nate, which is I wanted to talk about markets that were big in 2021 a little bit. What can we add to that, maybe? Is there, it sounds like education, even though it wasn't the top, it did surge back. So what were you hearing from distributors there?
No, I can't tell you for a fact that education is not the top market in 21. You talk about calculus. I'm still working through that data right now.
Okay.
It wasn't the top in 2020, but it definitely rebounded. Right. And education, again, it was depressed in 20 for obvious reasons. Right? People were not in schools. So many schools were remote in 20. So many colleges and universities were just, very hamstrung by what they could and couldn't offer. So no, it was a very different environment. But I know it's going to be, I think what you're going to see is as things continue to get back to whatever normal is going to look like, right, you're going to see some of the bigger traditional industries, the ones that have been the top, the manufacturing, the education, the healthcare, construction, start to rise up. And I think as more people start to return to the office, however that looks, right, then you'll start to see some increased spending from companies that do things like, technology. And as those big tech conferences hopefully start coming back this year, especially you look at, South by Southwest and other ones that that we all know about, as they start to come back and you look at spending for those, that will really you'll start to see some pretty sharp gains, because this industry, for as much as we talk about employee gifts and kitting, there's a lot of this industry that is event based.
No one would argue with that. Yeah.
Trade shows, sporting events, and as those start to grow, and you start to see, for the summertime, all of the concerts that are being announced, all of the new, all of the large public events coming up, I think you're going to really start noticing the growth of those. But like we talk about now, place your orders now, man. You gotta place your orders now for what, August?
Yeah. Gosh, I hope it's not that far out. But yeah, being proactive about prospecting for events down the year is always a good thing. I'll chime in with a couple of things on markets that just in looking at some of the data that your research had showed. I think nonprofits, even though they weren't a top, they had scaled up significantly over the last 12 months. And I thought that was a notable niche to maybe target, because sometimes we think, oh, nonprofits, their budgets are always so tight and everything. But due to complications around having events, I think they needed to look to different ways to reward donors, to generate income. And I think that they were turning to branded merchandise maybe more than in the past. Is that something that some of your research seemed to bear out?
You know what? Here's the thing. I think you have to kind of switch your thinking about nonprofits. I think nonprofits don't buy promotional products with their money; they buy the money with the money of their donors, right? So it's kind of, I mean, that's the way I've always thought about nonprofits. So when if I'm watching, and I watched it last week, the Kenny Rogers tribute concert on PBS. Not even sure how it came on, but I did. But the point was, they were giving away different promotional items. Sometimes sometimes it was just music and DVDs, but sometimes it was other types of promotional products, and they were giving them away based on what your membership level was or what your donation level was. So they're purchasing these items using the money of their donors. So if the donors are giving more money, then all of a sudden they have more money to spend on promo. So when you think about a charity race that costs $50 to enter, or $75 to enter, if they're giving away a T-shirt and a little a couple of bags of things, they're spending the money that they're raising as part of allowing them to raise more money, right? So that's kind of what it is. So nonprofits, when they couldn't do these types of large events, they had to find new ways to do it. And one of the easiest ways was get a donation, ship out something to the person who's a donor. And that definitely rose. But now I think what you're going to see is, while that still will be there, I don't know that that will be as important, because people are going to start coming together again for the events that are really very large fundraising events.
Gotcha. All right, very interesting. I had this question a little further down, but let me move it up because I think it plays in here. What markets do you think, we were kind of doing a bit of a retrospective there, bringing us into 2022. What markets do you think are going to be most lucrative this year for distributors to sell into? Is it going to be a lot of the same? Is it going to, I know you mentioned some of the traditional runs are surging, but is there niche opportunities out there? What do you kind of see playing out on the ground?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's going to be, it's going to be the top two. It's going to be education and healthcare. Those are going to be those are going to be the largest industries by far, right? I think what's going to be very interesting to see is, real estate is something that's sort of a perplexing thing, because even though real estate's hot, I don't, all around the country, especially in the Northeast, prices are through the roof. But again, I don't know that but that was not necessarily realized in overall spend, right? Because even though, prices are up, there's not a lot of inventory. And the places where companies like real estate or professional services and those types of, where they would normally advertise their business, those places were not really available to them. Whether it was like local events or, chambers of commerces, they were not really around much in terms of like meeting in person or doing these types of activities in 2021, and especially 2020. I think as those start to come up, even though you might see a slowdown in some of real estate prices and such, I think you might actually see a pickup in their marketing, because like right now, if you're a real estate agent, do you really need to market?
Yeah, I was going to say, now the competition gets a little stiffer because there's less pool of clients out there. So now hey, we of course advise clients all the time that you should be marketing and advertising in good times and bad, but I think maybe there could be a tendency, well, I've got so much business going on already, why do I need to market further for sale?
Yeah, and another one of those might be, and this is a little niche, and this is normally one of the smaller industries of the ones that we measure, will be automotive, right? You can't find a car right now. And I mean, it's hard. It's really genuinely hard to find a car. And that's horrible if you're looking at it from a marketing point of view, because you're not really going to be marketing much. No, you're not marketing items you don't sell. So as soon as like these supply chain issues with the technology and with the microchips and with the cars coming into America starts, loosening up, and I do believe that there's going to be a switch flipped very, very soon on that, where it's going to go from 0 to 60. Yes, automotive. Right?
You got that one in there.
I did. In a very short amount of time. So I think when that happens, you're going to see a ton of promotions that will have to be done by automotive companies, by dealerships, because there's also going to be an incredible amount of pent-up demand as well, and a lot of competition for these for vehicles. So definitely, I would keep an eye on that as well. Not to discount some of the other industries that we already talked about, but though if you're looking for some like what I would consider niche opportunities, I would go there.
All right, that's really interesting insights, Nate. Let's jump though now back to some 2021 retrospective, because I think what was notable is that distributors of various sizes all did experience growth. So can you talk about that a little bit? Just how was that collective gain of last year, that total distributor, that was spread out? And can you tell us how small distributors did, how larger distributors did relative to their overall increase in sales for the industry?
Yeah, sure. So the larger distributors increased more. Those with over $1 million or over $5 million in sales tended to increase by about, mid-teens, I guess you could say, like low to mid-teens, 14, 15%-ish. But even the smaller distributors saw, increases of, 7 to 10%. So it was, very often, and I know that seems like a big gap, but we've seen it before where it's been very, very stark, where larger distributors would increase, by 5%, and the smallest distributors might have decreased by 0.5%. So like over the course of the years that we've been doing this study, I've seen that. So what you saw was, you didn't necessarily see that. You saw that there was an increase across all. Now listen, I think small businesses, and I'm talking about distributors here, I mean the businesses that they may serve, had a bit more of they had a slower return, I guess you could say.
Okay.
In terms of growing their business and in terms of spending more money. Whereas larger companies, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies, they had a quicker gain. But I still think what you saw was
And the thinking there, Nate, just to jump in, I'm sorry to cut you off, is that your larger distributors tend to be serving those more quote enterprise type clients, those Fortune 500 ones who work quicker to spend. So that could have been why they did increase more relative to where they started from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, but I do think that even with all of that, there was still positive gain seen across the spectrum of all different sizes of distributors. And listen, everybody was hit in Q2 and Q3 of 2020. Everybody, regardless of size, you were hit. In Q4, you also saw a lot of companies, though, of 20 start to pick up again, especially some of the bigger clients, and that carried through into Q1 and beyond of 2021. So I think you have definitely seen improvements throughout the course of the year, and you did see growth throughout the course of the year for everybody.
All right, very good. And again, to put in perspective, I think you said 7 to 10% for distributors on the smaller side. That's still really impressive because we're a relatively mature industry that even in like good years in recent years past, the percentage growth was like lower single digits, mid single digits.
Sure.
So to be in that range it does denote significant growth and significant achievement after a very rough year. Fair to say?
Yeah, and especially after we were still, let's be honest, we were still in the throes of a pandemic for a good part of the year, even into 22.
Yeah. All right, very good. So we had a question come in, Nate. I'll kick it over your way. What are some of the hottest promo and tech items these days? That's the big question, isn't it? What's selling hot right now? What are you hearing? You have any research out there on that currently?
Yeah, so like it's going to be the targets that are going to be available now. Like that's really the kind of the challenging thing. There's a lot of products that are still available. I remember I did a webinar not that many months ago with a CEO of one of the bigger companies out there. He said, if I don't have it, somebody else has it. There's products out there. It's just really, figuring out exactly what those are. Moving forward, though, if I'm looking out, like into the quote unquote crystal ball of Q2 and Q3, when you start to see a lot of these large events starting to happen, apparel is going to be. I think apparel is going to make a big comeback. It was down last year for the first time that we'd seen. I think you're going to start seeing apparel all of a sudden start coming back. I think
when you say down, Nate, down as a percentage of industry sales, is that what you mean? Yeah.
You can take that in every possible way, and I'm sure it's going to be correct.
Okay.
Right. I'm talking for 2020, not necessarily 21, because we're still kind of looking at that.
Okay.
But I do think that you're going to see apparel, which is going to most likely increase in 21, continue into 22, especially as people get together, because people love apparel. And if you've been to any concerts or any sporting events, that's one of the most predominant products being given out, especially since if the actual product is already on our store, so to speak, a lot of that decoration can also happen right here. For hard goods, that's really that's a question for, again, what is the purpose of what you're going to be using, and where are you giving it out? Hard goods is one of the things that's been most affected, I would say, by supply chain disruptions. Are there a lot of hard goods that are still coming into this country? Absolutely. And has that certainly loosened and really started to increase over the last couple of months? You would know better than me, but I'm going to say yeah.
Yeah.
As far as hot products though, that's kind of TBD.
Okay.
That's the best way I can describe. You certainly had we look at monthly sales data or monthly ESP search data, I guess you could say. And what you've seen is rise of drinkware, start to really, kick up, especially brand name drinkware, and higher quality. It doesn't have to be the brands that everybody knows, but it has to be higher end. So you've certainly seen drinkware now taking up, I believe it was like 5 or 6 of the top 10 spots now. You're going to also see especially depending on where you're located in certain states, the rise of different types of bags that are going to be out. Like in New Jersey, starting at the end of May, they're banning also. I mean, not only you can't in grocery stores, you can't even buy a single-use bag, paper or plastic. So it's going to be those reusable tote bags. So I think you're going to start seeing the emergence of those. The thing is, I can tell you what it's not going to be, and that's PPE.
Yeah.
PPE products are sharply down, and I think that's probably where they're going to stay.
All right. Yeah, I think all great points. And picking up on your apparel points, I think what we're seeing from certainly some of the larger suppliers, your Sanmars, your Gildans of the world, next level. There's a real push to release, shirts, t-shirts in particular, but also other items that have some kind of sustainability narrative tied to them, where they're made with either some kind of recycled component, or there's some kind of green initiative tied to them, whether how they were produced with less water, or the types, if they use organic cotton, stuff of that nature. And I think demand for that is going to grow. En masse, is it huge yet? I don't think so, but I think it is one of those things that we're going to see more demand for going forward, and that demand will pick up this year.
Yeah, no, we've looked at that in the past as part of our ad impression study, right? So we've looked at the demand for that, and demand for that has certainly been expressed, right? The question is, will that expressed demand turn into sales? Because those products are more expensive. And listen,
totally right. Yeah.
Right now, everything is more expensive right now. Yeah. Right. So I think it's going to be what are people's tolerance is for products like that, and will they continue to, will the tolerances increase or decrease? If anything, I think tolerances for higher prices, for better or worse, are actually increasing among American consumers. It'll be curious to see if that continues for businesses.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think given some of the inflationary pressures we're continuing to face, and that they don't look like they're going to immediately abate, there's almost a begrudged acceptance of it, and you're kind of expecting to pay more. So maybe in some ways, from a promo distributor's perspective, that is a chance to talk about some of these items as, hey, you're going to be paying, above maybe what you would have expected to in the past anyway. Look at this quality item; it's only a few cents more, and there's this sustainability narrative tied to it. So
yeah, you know what, Chris, I can tell you, I did when I was in Orlando and Fort Worth for our trade shows, I conduct focus groups with our members at every one of our trade shows, and the topic of supply chain came up, and the topic of prices came up, and what they were telling me was that, and you're going back to January and February, when there was significant already significant price pressures and prices going up. And I asked bluntly, did they receive pushback from their clients about increased prices? And the answer was across the board, no.
No.
So there had always been a lot of pressure to raise. There's always been a lot of pressure to not raise prices. I think the current environment has sort of diminished that. And I think if you're trying to decide, if you're a distributor right now, whether or not now is the correct time to raise prices, I think the answer is absolutely yes.
It is, because there's a tolerance in the market for it. All right, very good. I'll just remind all our listeners, first off, thank you, of course, for sticking with us. And then if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. So Nate, how are distributors? You mentioned you were talking to distributors. How are distributors feeling about their prospects in 2022? Maybe the simpler question is, what's the general outlook among distributors for this year?
Positive.
Positive. Okay.
It's just positive. Like, that's all. I mean, that kind of sums it up. I can tell you, it was positive when we did the same exact study back in Q1 of 2020, right? But it took a sharp. It actually became as we have something called the Counselor Confidence Index, where we actually measure overall, confidence in the promotional products industry. And this has been modeled after other things out there, other magazines that have done similar things in the past. It took the single largest fall through Q2 of 2020 that we had ever seen. It was like the trough of a tidal wave.
Nate, I'm going to chime in because I remember our base. Just to give everybody context, the baseline reading of the Counselor Confidence Index is 100. Q2 2020, it went down, I think, to 54. Is that right? I mean, it was about in the basement. Yeah.
Yeah. It was stunning. Let me tell you how shocking those results were when they came in, and that is based squarely on numbers. And it was staggering how big of a hit. So what have we seen since then? Well, we saw a fairly gradual increase in it shortly after Q2 to Q3 and then to Q4 of 2020. It rebounded, though, let's be blunt, slowly. From Q1 21 through the end of the year, though, it rebounded actually sharply. And we're now above that sort of 100 benchmark level. we're not quite near where it was pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting closer to there because I think there's an incredible amount of optimism. Listen, and what is that? Why is that? There's a lot of money out there right now in business.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money that businesses were trying to spend in Q4, and I don't know that you necessarily are going to see an abatement of that anytime soon.
Yeah, okay. I agree. Just in anecdotally talking to a lot of distributors, there has seemed that there's this feeling that COVID is a reality. We're learning to live with it, and that I don't want to like a lightning bolt hit us here, but like that we're going to be able to move forward, and that life as we know it or had known it is going to be kind of returning in big ways, and has in many senses, right? And that bodes well for our industry, and I think breeds a sense of confidence. Is that fair? Is that overstating it, or is that in line?
I don't think it's overstating it at all. I think actually, if I had to put it, I would say that people's idea of what normalcy is have evolved.
Okay.
Right? So what we're doing now probably would still seem to be somewhat odd to February 2020 Nate and Chris, right? But to 2022 Nate and Chris in March 31st, all of a sudden it seems like we're getting back to normal pretty close.
Yeah.
Whether or not we want it, I'll be honest with you, it's kind of irrelevant, right? But it's the perception that everything's getting back to normal. I think that's really where the gains are going to be seen.
Key. All right. Very, very good. I don't know if you have data on this yet, to be honest with you, Nate. I'll throw it out there. Is there anything any of your surveys yet that say, hey, X amount of distributors are kind of feeling that they're going to increase their overall sales this quarter or this year in 2022? Is there findings on that yet, or is that still forthcoming?
You can talk to me in about a week and a half on that, but I will tell you that it's going to be the majority that are going to say yes. The vast majority of them, and I'm not that are going to say, yeah, my sales are going to increase in 22.
All right, very good. All right, good outlook. So, all right. So, of course, though, things are going in the right direction, but we're by no means, without issues. There's, you mentioned supply chain. There's, obviously beyond just the obvious humanitarian issues that are happening in Ukraine. There's implications for economies, and that tends to ripple in a global marketplace. That tends to ripple. So, what are some of these kind of headwind type factors that might impact the industry this year, and is there any way that distributors can account for them?
I think you named two. I mean, obviously, we don't want to beat the mantra of the supply chain disruptions too much harder. That we are all painfully aware of.
Yeah.
The situation in the Ukraine is certainly something. Whether it's and that listen is that for a lot of U.S. businesses, I think it's probably much more psychological than anything, but that's still a powerful tool. And one of the most important things is that the government puts out a consumer confidence index. And when events such as what's happening right now in the Ukraine are happening, that shakes the consumer confidence index.
Absolutely.
Other things that shake it though is rising interest rates. That's certainly, they're on the rise. They've been up, sharply over the last couple of months, and I think that that's going to continue to impact. And it's again, from a psychological point of view, people see the value of their home prices going up on Zillow, right? They're not going to sell their house, but they see the value of them going up, so that has a positive impact. If all of a sudden you start to see maybe a reversal of that, then I think you will also you'll see a little bit of a decline in overall consumer and then subsequently business spending. That's what I would say. Those are the primary headwinds. Are there going to be others? Yeah, they're going to be. I don't exactly know what they are yet though.
Yeah, all right. And to your point, we don't want to be. I mean, everybody knows what's going on with supply chain. I think at this point, if you're in this industry, the question I think does come up. Is there a foreseeable end in sight to some of those issues? I've done quite a bit of reporting on this, and in talking to sourcing experts in our industry, they really don't see it abating significantly in the short term, or maybe even within 2022, if only because the supply chains are so complicated and are so global, and there's so many opportunities. There's so many opportunities for there to be further disruption. For instance, there's been a COVID surge in China recently, right? That's led China has a strict policy on hey, we get a few cases in an area, shutdowns come in. That affects factory production. It affects getting ships out of port. Obviously China's where we make most of the products that are sold here, so that impacts our supply chain further. So things like that, where there's this repeated potential for a disruption, I think are going to remain in play. It by no means it doesn't mean it's insurmountable or that it's going to derail, but it is going to be that ongoing issue, that an ongoing new normal of having to account for that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? Like, I mean, the only time in my life where there wasn't an ebb and flow that I've ever seen for any major event was with COVID. There was no ebb and flow. It was just, it was go time.
Right.
Like, it went from nothing to go time very, very quickly. And then it kind of dissipated over time. I think when you think about things like the supply chain, no, there's going to be ups and downs as it relates to that. So no, it's not going to be, very, very rarely is progress a straight line. And I think that's going to be the same for that. There's going to be improvement. There's going to be setbacks as it goes along the way. I think that overall the direction, sort of like the trend line, as you will be improving. But okay. I think that there's going to be, whether on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or a quarterly basis, some challenges.
Okay, fair to say. All right. Here's a question. This is probably research you're going to be doing over these next couple of weeks on Q1 2022. Your gut feeling. Do you think that we'll be up in Q1 2022 relative to 2021? Because Q1 2021 was still kind of depressed. I mean, there was a huge COVID surge at that time in North America, and sales are not great.
I think it will definitely. I think I would be shocked if it wasn't up. I mean, does that mean it's definitely going to be up? No. I mean, right? I think it will be up, though. I think what you would have seen is that, and I'm not basing this on any data I have. I'm basing this on items that I've read from the federal government, stuff like that, and other types of other organizations. That in January and February, everything was looking very, very positive, especially when Omicron kind of started to fade away. The situation in Europe, the situation with Ukraine has certainly put a damper, and it's affected people. It's affected business spending. Do I think that will have enough to have a that negative of an impact that it will be down? No, I don't. But I truthfully, until we get the data, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. That you anticipated a question, which I was going to ask you. I've heard anecdotally, just in talking to certain distributors, that boy, things were chugging in those first couple months, despite Omicron, despite supply chain challenges. No big deal. We're humming along. And then the the Russian invasion, I should say, of Ukraine occurred, and that for the reasons you said, it just causes nervousness. It causes apprehension about how it could reverberate across markets. And then for distributors, larger distributors in particular, that have international clients that operate in Europe and have operations elsewhere, then the impact could be even more directly felt. So you have complications like that maybe take a little of the shine off what Q1 might have been had that conflict not happened.
No, without 100%. 100%.
Yeah. All right. We're kind of getting toward the end here, folks. So if you have any questions or comments, please chime in, and be happy to try to get to them. I think the big question everybody wants to know is, will distributors' collective sales in 2022 surpass pre-pandemic levels? So what I'm asking you is, do you think we'll hit an all-time record this year? Because if we surpass 2019, which was the greatest ever year in promo sales, we'd have to have done a record, right? So do you think we'll get there, or are we still a couple years out?
Plead into fifth. I mean, listen, I'll answer. Do I think so? Probably not. Let's be honest. Do we think that everything is going to be back to normal as it was in 2020 or 2019 rather? I don't know, but there's a couple of unknowns here, Chris, that could push it above. I mean, if we start looking at inflation rates and prices going up, you don't have to sell the same amount of promo products to have the same amount of sales anymore.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So if you all of a sudden see a 10 or 15% rise in the prices of some items out there, and could it be that stark? Yeah, it can be for some of them. When you start to see that, well, that means that to sell the same amount as you did in 1 year, you have to sell 10 or 15% less for the same amount of money. So this is not necessarily a quantity game here in terms of overall pieces, right? But if you're talking about overall actual like raw sales numbers, no, you could be. You might not. And listen, sales are not necessarily profitability.
Right. I was going to say sales are not earnings or profitability, because your margins might be less because you're taking a hit to keep the business moving.
You know, so like, yeah, they may not be. So you might sell more and make less. That's a possibility. So do I know yet? It's a great question. Under normal circumstances, if there was not inflation, if there was not price pressures moving up, then the answer would be no. The answer right now is I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fair. It's fair and it's honest. I'm going to make a prediction that I think we're going to get right close to it, but not quite tip over that line just yet. That's my sense. I just feel like there's so many. Don't get me wrong. We will have a gain. We will have an annual gain, in my opinion, barring something massively unforeseen. Although over the last 2 years, we've been in the business of massively unforeseen, so we don't.
Chris.
Yeah, we don't really know. But I'm sitting here today. I feel confident that we're going to have another annual increase. I don't think it'll be as significant as a 12% annual increase, but I think we are going to push up toward that record number, but maybe not quite get there yet. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah. All right, well, Nate, thank you for jumping on. That was my last question. Do you have any final thoughts or takeaways for the folks who are listening today?
Yeah, please answer the surveys you get from me over the next week, because they're vital. They're vital in helping ASI report on the industry. We can't report all of the data that we do without the help of our members. It is greatly appreciated by me. Everything that is ever submitted is 100% confidential. I mean, I hold that very, 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 very close to my heart. I will always do that. And I am always, and also if you have any questions on any of the data that we have, whether it's from the sales surveys, whether it's not from the state of the industry, the ad impression study, reach out to me directly. Please do so. Everybody will get emails from me over the course of a month, every 2 months. So definitely reach out to me, or just call ASI and they'll put you in contact.
All right, perfect. And of course, if you want more information, more in-depth stuff, you could head to our website, asicentral.com. You could hit /news. We have daily, there's daily news stories, industry updates. We have a whole section of the website dedicated to research. So please go and avail yourselves of that. It's there for you to use and hopefully benefit from. So Nate Kucsma, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm Chris Ruvo. We're both for ASI. And thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We hope that you found this helpful.